In the summer of 1914, the world believed in the future. It was an age of science, of industry, of reason. An age of electric lights, telephones, and towering empires that seemed destined to last forever. Progress felt inevitable. Civilization felt permanent. Then a single bullet fired in the obscure city of Sarajevo extinguished that belief forever. It triggered a chain reaction that plunged the world's most advanced nations into a 4-year industrial meat grinder. This is the story of the Great War. It is not just a story of battles and treaties. It is the story of a suicide. The collective suicide of old Europe and the violent, bloody birth of the 20th century in the mud and poison gas of the trenches.
Europe in 1914 was not a peaceful continent. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. The great powers were entangled in a web of rigid, interlocking alliances, turning the continent into two armed camps. A conflict between any two nations could now drag everyone into war. This was fueled by a rabid, chest-thumping nationalism that taught millions to hate people they had never met. And it was all backed by a frantic arms race. Britain and Germany built fleets of massive new battleships. France and Russia swelled the ranks of their armies. Each nation, claiming to be securing peace, was preparing for a war they all secretly believed was inevitable, and perhaps even necessary to prove their strength. When war was declared in August 1914, crowds erupted in celebration in Berlin, Paris, and London. Young men rushed to enlist, fearing the war would be over before they could get their share of the glory. The generals, trained in the 19th century, planned for a war of swift movement, heroic cavalry charges, and decisive battles. The universal belief was that the boys would be home by Christmas. It was the greatest delusion of the modern era. They marched into battle with 19th century ideals and were met with 20th century technology. They charged on horseback and were shredded by machine guns. They advanced in neat lines and were annihilated by artillery shells that could be fired from miles away. The war of movement died within weeks, and the real war began. From the somber Alps to the North Sea, they dug in. A vast, festering scar of trenches stretched across Europe. This was the new battlefield, a stagnant, lunar landscape of mud, barbed wire, and craters filled with stagnant water and rotting corpses. Life became a monotonous cycle of terror and boredom. Days were spent hiding from snipers and the constant, nerve-shattering artillery bombardments. And then the whistle would blow. Men would climb over the top into a storm of machine gun fire in a suicidal attempt to gain a few hundred yards of useless ground. At the Somme, the British lost nearly 20,000 men on the first day alone. At Verdun, France and Germany bled each other white for 10 months, suffering 750,000 casualties. This wasn't war. It was industrialized slaughter. The war was a machine not just for killing men, but for killing empires. Under the immense strain, the old multinational empires began to crack. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the German Empire, all would be gone by the war's end. But the most dramatic collapse happened in the East. The Russian Empire, poorly equipped and incompetently led, suffered catastrophic losses. The people starved, the soldiers mutinied. In 1917, the Tsar was overthrown. Into this vacuum of chaos, Germany smuggled a secret weapon back into Russia, a revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin. The war had created the perfect conditions for the specter of communism to finally find a body. The Bolshevik Revolution, a direct consequence of the war's failures, changed the course of history forever. When the guns finally fell silent on November 11th, 1918, Europe was a graveyard. A generation was lost, and the survivors were hollowed out, disillusioned men who would be known as the Lost Generation. The victors gathered at Versailles to forge a new world. They called it a peace to end all wars. Instead, they created a peace that guaranteed another one. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany, forcing it to accept sole blame for the war and burdening it with impossible reparations payments. It redrew the map of Europe with little regard for the people living there, creating new grievances. A young, angry Austrian corporal, recovering from a gas attack, would look upon this treaty not as a peace, but as a national shame that must be avenged. This is the Fulcrum. World War I was the original sin of the 20th century. It shattered the world's faith in progress, God, and authority. It showed that civilized nations were capable of unimaginable barbarism. Out of its ashes rose the horrors that would define the age: the Soviet Union, born from Russia's collapse; fascist Italy, born from post-war chaos; and Nazi Germany, born from the humiliation of Versailles. It created the cynical, traumatized modern mind. All the struggles that followed, the rise of totalitarianism, the Second World War, the Cold War, were aftershocks of this first great cataclysm. The future we were supposed to have died somewhere in the mud of Flanders. We are still living in the world that was born in its place.